Movie summary. Lights Out, 2016. The story opens with Paul talking to his son, Martin, via Skype late at night while he's at work at Wells Textiles. Martin tells his father that his mother, Sophie, has been talking to herself. Paul tells Martin that things will get better. Paul's coworker, Esther, is securing the warehouse. When she goes to turn off the lights in one of the rooms, a silhouette of a woman with monstrously long fingers appears in the back of the room. When she goes to turn the lights back on, it disappears. She cautions Paul about the apparition and departs. Shortly thereafter, Paul prepares to close up for the night. As Paul is about to leave, he encounters the same woman. Paul runs back to his office and grabs a baseball bat. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker and ultimately go out, leaving him in darkness. The door opens, and the woman brutally kills Paul. Sometime later, Paul's son, Martin, sees his mother, Sophie, conversing with something in the dark. Sophie sees Martin and comforts him about the event. As Martin returns to bed, he spots a peculiar figure in the shadow behind Sophie. Martin then locks himself in his bedroom out of fear. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Martin's sister, Rebecca, is spending time with her boyfriend, Brett. The following day, Martin finds himself in the nurse's office after dozing off in class for the third time in the past week. Since the school is unable to reach Sophie, they decide to call Rebecca to the school. She and Brett meet with Emma, from Child Protective Services, who updates her on what has been happening with Martin. Rebecca speaks with Martin privately. He confides in her that he hasn't been sleeping well recently. Brett drives Rebecca and Martin to Sophie's house. Brett remains in the car while Rebecca escorts Martin to the house. As they walk, Martin mentions that Sophie has been speaking to someone named Diana. Rebecca informs Martin that Diana is not real. Martin goes to his room to pack some clothes, unbeknownst to Rebecca. Rebecca argues with her mother upon discovering that Sophie has been overlooking her antidepressant medication. Rebecca informs Sophie that she is bringing Martin to her home for a few nights, just as Martin approaches with his suitcase prepared. Sophie starts to cry and begs Rebecca to allow Martin to stay, but Rebecca takes Martin and proceeds to her residence. Later, Martin asks Rebecca, "If Mom's crazy, does it mean we're crazy too?" Rebecca says no. Rebecca wakes and hears a scratching noise and figures it must be Martin. She looks to where the noise is coming from and sees the figure hunched over and scratching the floor near the door of the bedroom. Since Rebecca resides above a tattoo studio, the illumination from the sign above the tattoo studio flickers on and off approximately every 10 seconds. Rebecca is able to see the figure when the sign's light is off, and it vanishes when the light returns. The figure becomes aware that Rebecca is observing it. Consequently, it vanishes and subsequently reappears standing in front of Rebecca, and as it charges towards her, it disappears as the light activates again. Rebecca hurriedly moves to the light switch, just as the sign's light turns off, but she successfully flips on the light switch for her bedroom in time. She searches for Martin and discovers him in the bathroom, asleep in the bathtub with a flashlight turned on. The Child Protective Services agent goes to Rebecca's apartment to get Martin. The agent explains to Rebecca that to get Martin from Sophie's custody requires Rebecca to file charges against Sophie. Rebecca discovers what the woman was etching into her floor. The name, Diana. She remembers her own encounters with Diana from her childhood, as well as the reason she left when her father deserted them. Rebecca and Brett go to Sophie's house. Rebecca heads upstairs and finds a photo of Sophie with Diana beside her. Rebecca then discovers a box containing details about Sophie and her previous time in a mental health facility during her childhood. While Sophie was at the facility, she encountered a girl named Diana, who had a unique skin condition that prevented her from being exposed to light. Rebecca hears a sound in her old room, and when she goes to investigate, the door slams shut, and Diana pulls her up to the ceiling. Rebecca's screams reach Brett, who manages to open the door, and the light from the hallway makes Diana vanish, causing Rebecca to fall to the floor. Brett tells Rebecca that Sophie is coming home with Martin, prompting Rebecca to take the box containing the information about Diana, and they quickly exit through the back door. Later that day, Sophie and Martin are enjoying some time together watching a classic film. Sophie stops the movie and tells Martin that she will return shortly. Suddenly, Sophie turns off the lights in the room. Martin feels scared, and Sophie tries to calm him down. She begins to share the story of her friendship with Diana. Diana approaches Martin. When she reaches him, he panics and attempts to switch on some lights. Diana tries to intervene, but Sophie obstructs her, prompting Diana to hit Sophie, sending her to the floor. This gives Martin the opportunity to reach the front door and flee. Martin heads to Rebecca's residence. Brett goes to the store, allowing Rebecca the chance to speak with Martin. Martin informs her that Diana is real. Rebecca confirms that he is indeed telling the truth. At that moment, a knock is heard at the door. Assuming it is Brett, Rebecca goes to open the door but finds no one is there. Rebecca and Martin start to hear Diana within the walls. The same scratching noises that Rebecca previously heard begin emanating from the closet in her bedroom. She cautiously approaches the closet door and switches on the light. No one seems to be present. Suddenly, Diana grabs Martin's leg and attempts to pull him under Rebecca's bed, but Rebecca manages to pull Martin back out. With Brett, Rebecca and Martin go back to Sophie's house. Rebecca tells Sophie that Diana is dead. Rebecca explains that there is a dead person in that house, and Sophie let it stay. After saying that ghosts are not real, Sophie goes upstairs to her room. Rebecca informs Martin that the three of them will be staying there for the night. Brett will sleep on the couch while Rebecca will share the room with Martin. Rebecca heads to Sophie's bedroom to inform her about their overnight stay. As she steps away from the bedroom door, Sophie opens it. She expresses her happiness about Rebecca spending the night. Sophie takes Rebecca's hand and discreetly hands her a note. Once Sophie shuts the door, Rebecca opens the note, which states, "I need help." Later that night, Diana cuts the power to the block. Brett goes outside with a flashlight to investigate while Rebecca descends to the basement with a wind-up lantern to search for the fuse box. Martin wakes up and notices that Rebecca is missing. He takes a candle, heads to the hallway, and calls out for Rebecca. Behind Martin, Diana appears. Diana pulls Martin away, but he turns around and points the candle at her, which briefly causes her to retreat. Martin proceeds downstairs to the basement, where he locates Rebecca. Diana shows up at the top of the stairs and slams the basement door shut. They approach the basement door and start calling for Brett. Diana tries to murder Brett. Although wounded, Brett flees by illuminating his car's headlight and drives off. Sophie tells Diana not to hurt her children because they do not know any better. Sophie calls out to Diana and informs her that she, Diana, cannot continue living without her. Sophie goes to get her medication, but Diana shows up and strikes Sophie across the room. Rebecca and Martin remain confined in the basement. She rummages through a box and utilizes scrap paper to maintain the fire in the furnace. Martin discovers an old black light, which he hands to Rebecca. She examines the basement and notices writing covering the walls in one area. Diana had been residing in the basement because it's continually dark down there. Diana appears and Rebecca discovers that black light cannot harm Diana. Rebecca tells Martin that she saw Diana and she does not disappear with the light of the black light. Rebecca explains that if they can see Diana, at least they know where she is. Brett arrives accompanied by 2 police officers. He remains outside near his vehicle while the 2 police officers go inside. They are able to get Rebecca and Martin out of the basement. Diana kills one of the police officers when he goes to check out the kitchen. Rebecca attempts to alert the other officer that she requires a flashlight to survive. However, the officer does not heed her warning. Diana kills the second police officer. Rebecca ascends the stairs, but is confronted by Diana. Diana lifts Rebecca and tosses her off the second-floor balcony, resulting in a harsh fall to the ground floor, yet she remains relatively uninjured. Diana heads downstairs and throws Rebecca into the wall. Sophie appears behind her with a gun from one of the dead police officers. Sophie shoots Diana, but nothing happens. Sophie puts the gun to her head and says to Diana, "There is no you without me." Sophie then pulls the trigger, killing her. Then Diana vanishes from existence. Afterward, the police take away Sophie's body, while Rebecca, Martin, and Brett meet at the ambulance.